Alexis awoke with a start. She'd had that dream before, but it began to fade before she could write it down in her dream journal. Not again, she mumbled to herself. She had been having strange dreams since her mother and sister had died in the car accident over a year ago, and she had a feeling that the reason she was having these dreams was because of missing them. She had started to write them down, but she only remembered bits and pieces, or nothing at all. Well, time to get up, I suppose. Alexis reached over and patted the furry figure next to her on the bed. Wake up, sleepyhead. Amber eyes blinked at her as the cat slowly stood and stretched. She always imagined that if he could talk, he would tell her that it was time to go back to sleep, not wake up. Alexis laughed at the thought and tossed the blanket to the side. Today is another day, a new beginning. Alexis smiled to herself as she remembered her mother's favorite saying. Today will be different, Tiger. I can feel it. She stood up and stretched. Alexis grabbed her clothes that were folded in a tidy pile on her dresser and went to take a shower. Tiger watched her go with little interest. What did it matter to him if she wanted to go and get soaking wet? He was a cat and had little use for such things. A short while later, Alexis reemerged clean and refreshed. She was brushing her long auburn hair when she noticed Tiger sitting on the windowsill. Do you want out, boy? Tiger meowed at her, and she walked over to open the window. She stroked his shoulders, the only markings there a gray patch of fur that over time had started to resemble a dragon with its wings outstretched. Alexis noticed that it looked even clearer today than normal. The rest of him was striped gray and black. He was the only one she had left and hated to let him out of her sight, but knew he would not be happy if she kept him cooped up all day. She picked him up for a quick hug before letting him out. I will see you after work, Tiger. Stay safe. She kissed the top of his head. He meowed and jumped out of her arms and through the open window. Alexis finished getting ready for work. She would be late if she didn't hurry. She grabbed her purse and paused as she passed her bookshelf. She closed her eyes and grabbed a book. A Calling of Dragons. I haven't read this one yet, she said as she opened her eyes again. She slipped it into her purse, picked up her keys, and walked out the door, locking it behind her. She hummed to herself as she started the car and left for work. Alexis was so intent on watching the road that she never noticed the shadow that seemed to be following her car. Alexis, the boss wants to see you. Alexis glanced up to see Sharon poke her head in the door to her office and smile. I'm sure it is nothing to worry about. Sharon smirked as she turned to leave. Everybody knows that you could never do anything wrong. Alexis frowned at Sharon's back as she walked away. Sharon had been acting funny since Alexis had gotten the big promotion and she hadn't. And that was also when things had started to go wrong. Alexis had a feeling that a certain someone had something to do with it. She pushed away from her desk and stood up. She didn't want to keep the boss waiting too long. You wanted to see me, Jeff? Alexis asked as she stepped inside the open door to the boss's office. It didn't take a rocket scientist to tell that something was wrong. She sat down. She had a very bad feeling about this. She had always loved her job before, but after the accident that had taken her family away from her, and then the promotion a few months ago, everything had been going wrong. It was as if someone did not want her there. Is something wrong, Jeff? She asked, trying not to let her true feelings show. Alexis, I'm afraid I'm going to have to let you go. Your quality of work just hasn't been the same. I had hoped that your promotion would be enough to draw you out of your depression, but it wasn't, Jeff said without hesitation. He seemed tense, as if he expected a confrontation. Lately, you've been making a lot of mistakes in your reports. We can't afford this kind of thing when it comes to dealing with our clients. I know you have said this wasn't the way you typed them up, but I can see no other explanation. I'm very sorry. I see. And are you sure there is no other explanation? Alexis said, glancing suspiciously at Sharon, who leered through the open window. I am. You have an hour to clean out your desk and leave. You may pick up your last paycheck on Monday. Alexis nodded once and left the office. The only thing she needed was the picture on her desk. Let them clean up the rest. Glancing at everything one last time, she took the picture out of its frame and stared at it longingly. The happy faces of her mother and sister stared out at her. A single tear fell down her face as she tucked the picture into her back pocket and walked out the door, ignoring Sharon's laughter that seemed to follow her out. The rest of her tears didn't come until she pulled into her driveway. She sat in her car for a long time and wept. She had finally calmed down when she looked up to see amber eyes peering at her through the windshield. She stepped out of the car and hugged Tiger close to her. "You are always here for me," she whispered into his fur. He smelled faintly of smoke, and something she could not describe. Taking a bigger whiff, she said, "Just what have you been doing all day? You smell like smoke." She hugged him closer and went into the house. As she sat her purse down on the couch, the book she had placed inside just that morning slipped out. She picked up the book and went into her room. She gently placed Tiger on the bed and sat down beside him. As she opened the book, he began to purr. She glanced at him and then read the dedication. "If you are reading this, then it is time for you to return home. Your guide will explain everything to you. Do not be afraid, just believe." Now that is a strange dedication, she thought to herself. She looked over at Tiger, who was staring at her so intently that it felt like he was trying to tell her something. In her mind she heard something, a faint voice, chanting, getting louder by the second. Then she felt as if she were falling into those amber eyes staring into her blue ones. Just as she thought she would fall forever, the cat blinked slowly. "It is done," he said, and Alexis passed out. She woke staring at her ceiling. "That was a weird dream," she said to herself. She glanced at the clock and saw that it was almost midnight. She started to sit up, but felt the weight of a small, furry body on her chest. Alexis reached up to pet Tiger and suddenly remembered that she had heard him speak. Jumping up, she dumped him unceremoniously onto the bed. "You spoke to me," she said accusingly. "Wait. You couldn't have spoken to me. You are a cat, and you don't talk. I am going crazy. That has to be it." Alexis nodded to herself as she paced back and forth across the floor. She glanced over at her cat. He was licking his paws as if he were waiting for her to be done freaking out. "If you are quite finished, I can explain everything to you," he said. "Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about." Alexis felt her jaw drop and thought she might still be dreaming. She was just about to tell him so when he started laughing. It was a deep, amused laugh that didn't seem to match his small body. "Well, if this is a dream, I may as well go along with it. I'll wake up eventually," Alexis thought to herself. She sat down on the bed opposite her cat, who regarded her with eyes that suddenly seemed ancient. "So what do we need to talk about?" Alexis asked quietly, drawing her knees to her chest. She rested her chin there, not knowing if she would like the answer or not. "Everything is not as it seems. You are not of this world, and I am no mere cat. I will answer your questions the best that I can, but keep in mind I may not be able to answer all your questions just yet," Tiger began. He sat with his tail tucked around his paws and regarded her intently. "So what would you like to know first?" Alexis sat quietly for a moment before she began laughing. "Now I know I am dreaming. I am talking to a cat that says he isn't a cat, and apparently I'm an alien. I've heard it all now," Alexis exclaimed. "Okay, Alexis, you can wake up now," she said to herself as she patted her cheeks hard. "You aren't dreaming, I can assure you. But perhaps you do need to be convinced. Would you like to see my true form?" the cat asked. Alexis grew still and nodded her head. Tiger stood up then. "Very well. Follow me if you will. You will have to get the door. I'm afraid you wouldn't like going through the window." He led the way to the door and slipped through as Alexis wordlessly followed him. Tiger walked across the yard, and then pausing to look both ways at the road, he bounded across, without waiting to see if she followed. He slipped into the woods and made his way down a trail that looked as if it had been followed many times. Alexis thought she must be crazy for following a cat, but she was still unsure if she was dreaming or not. She reached and pinched her arm. She could definitely feel it, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. She increased her pace, not wanting to lose sight of the cat she had thought was merely her pet for so many years. How could she have a cat that wasn't a cat and not even know it? Alexis looked around and noticed that her surroundings were no longer familiar to her. She didn't venture into the woods very often, at least not on this side of the road. She had a secret alcove that she would go to behind her house, where she would stay for hours and read. Alexis wondered to herself why she had never been to the woods on this side. She glanced around once more and noticed they had come to a large clearing. The trees surrounding the area grew so close together that the only way in was the way they had just come from. The trees there leaned towards each other as if forming an archway, their branches so heavily intertwined that it was hard to tell where one began and the other ended. In the middle of the field was a large, scorched place on the ground, as if there had been many bonfires there throughout the years, but Alexis could see no other signs that anyone had ever been there. Tiger walked into the center of the scorched earth and turned towards her. He said, "You may want to stand back." Alexis turned to look at him and stepped away. She was about to ask what he was doing when he suddenly burst into flames. Alexis stared in horror as the flames engulfed her beloved cat. The smell of smoke and something she couldn't quite place made her gasp. Her horror turned to awe as his fur burned, shining blue scales taking its place. His muscles rippled beneath his skin, and as she watched, he seemed to be getting bigger. Moments later, there was no question as to whether he was getting bigger, as he had become the size of a large dog and was still growing. Two knots on either side of his shoulders swelled, and a pair of wings began to bud, much like a blossoming flower. His tail grew longer, and above his hind legs spines burst forth and continued down the length of his tail, getting increasingly smaller until they reached the end, where his tail ended in a point. His once feline face now only faintly resembled the cat he once was. His muzzle was elongated and tapered at the end, and he had horns where his ears had been but moments before. Large talons replaced his soft paws, each one razor-sharp and shining. He had now become the size of her mom's old station wagon, only about twice as long. Amber eyes stared at her from a now unmistakably reptilian face, the same amber eyes that were her beloved cat, but now shone with more wisdom than she could even imagine. "Wow," was all she could say when the transformation was complete. "So this is where you go every day when I go to work?" "Yes. I am your guide and have been watching over you. It is time to return home. Will you follow me?" Alexis nodded. The dragon bared his teeth in what must surely have been a smile, then he tilted his head upwards, blowing a stream of blue and purple fire into the sky. A small dark spot opened, growing larger by the second, until it appeared large enough for the dragon to pass through. "Climb on," Tiger encouraged as he lowered himself in front of her. Alexis hesitantly climbed on and found a good handhold. "Today is another day, a new beginning," she whispered. "Let's do this." The dragon beat his wings and they slowly lifted into the sky. Alexis shut her eyes as they disappeared into the portal, and it closed behind them with a small pop. The acrid scent of smoke and the sweet scent of magic, the only indication they were ever there. Thank you so much for joining me today for another day, a new beginning. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, please, give us a like. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe to our channel. We're trying to get more people in. As always, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.